presentation. All right, welcome out there. Welcome to our public meeting to inform the community about the updates within Sage Hill Open Space Preserve. We know these are really challenging times, so we're really thankful that you've taken a moment of your day to join us virtually. I'm Jen Spencer. I'm a park project manager for the County of San Diego Parks Department of Parks and Recreation, and I'll be your virtual guide today and main point of contact for the project. We are Zooming today, so let's take a peek at a few of the key features before we dive in. We're using the webinar platform, so you won't have a microphone or camera access, but you will be able to write in your questions or comments using the Q&A feature. Just click on the Q&A icon in your toolbar and type in your question. We'll either respond directly within the section, or we'll do our best to address your comment in the live Q&A section at the end of the presentation. If technology troubles arise during the meeting, which sometimes they do, you can always call in and listen to the audio. Here is the phone number and the webinar ID. Also, we'll have a recorded version available online after the presentation is completed. We'll share those links at the end of the presentation, and they'll be available on the project webpage. If you're on a mobile device, the Q&A feature is located at the bottom right of your screen. Joining us today for today's presentation, we'll start off by checking in with Deb from our resource management team here at the Department of Parks and Recreation. She'll fill us in on the acquisition history of the site, as well as the important conservation resources this site holds. Next, Brandon from our operations team will provide an update on recent progress their team has made within the preserve, as well as the maintenance of the preserve as we move forward. David, our Chief of Development, will provide more information on our upcoming projects in the preserve, as well as our sequence compliance. Last, but certainly not least, we're gonna love hearing from you. We'll open up our Q&A section that will be led by Jessica, our Marketing and Public Outreach Manager. Deb, take it away.
Great, thank you, Jen. So as Jen mentioned, my name is Deb Mosley, and I oversee the environmental and conservation team in DPR. With me for my team is also Crystal Benham, who's our environmental program manager, and I have two biologists, Jennifer Price and Beth Principe. So jumping into the project information, the Sage Hill Preserve, as you know, is an open space preserve that's located in the unincorporated area of the county near Escondido Creek. The preserve is approximately 232 acres. And on December 12, 2007, the Board of Supervisors authorized the Department of Parks and Recreation, or DPR, to seek funding and initiate efforts to acquire the Sage Hill property. And we subsequently acquired the property in 2009 in partnership with the Conservation Fund and the San Diego Association of Government, also known as SANDAG. So about Approximately 2/3 of the property was acquired as mitigation for Sandag transportation projects, and the remaining property was purchased using federal Section 6 grant funding. Due to the grant funding and that this is mitigation land, there is a management agreement that DPR entered in with Sandag, and there's a conservation easement over the property. The management agreement requires that DPR developed a public access plan that includes trails and parking for passive recreation use in the preserve. This is also allowed per the conservation easement. So after we acquired Sage Hill Preserve, DPR worked with California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, also known as the Wildlife Agencies, and with Sandag to develop a resource management plan for the preserve. The resource management plan, it's really a guiding document that provides management directives for county staff. It also includes our trail plan and any type of public access plan in the resource management plan that is allowed in the preserve. The resource management plan and this associated trail plan that's part of it was approved by DPR and also Sandag and the wildlife agencies in 2018. The project that we're going to discuss today is consistent with the approved plan. Next slide. So wanted to highlight a little bit about the conservation. As we talked about, this is an open space preserve. And so wanted to just spend a few minutes to discuss that with you. So the preserve is located within the Draft North County Multiple Species Conservation Program, or MSCP. We are currently working on completing this draft North County MSCP, and we anticipate having it approved and by 2025. So this really means that the preserve is protected as conserved land in perpetuity forever. And we are managing it to ensure that the species, including all the plants and animals, are protected. We have identified over 200 different species that live within this preserve, including plants, butterflies, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And these cute little pictures on the screen is a picture of a Western spadefoot and a California mouse, which are some of the examples of the animals that we find here at this property. So what do we do to protect these sensitive species? And we, including managing the land, we do biological monitoring of the preserve to really ensure that these species are thriving. We track the species use on our preserve, and we ensure that the on-site natural resources are protected and managed properly. In addition to our monitoring efforts, we also work with our regional partners. For example, we are working with the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, to monitor California gnatcatcher on the preserve as part of a regional monitoring effort. So in addition to monitoring and management, we also have done some habitat restoration on site since we've acquired the property. For example, we've conducted site cleanup and treatment of invasive plants in the northern part of the preserve. We've also done some coastal sage scrub revegetation efforts within the preserve. And as you're going to hear a little bit later in our presentation, we have some additional restoration planned as well. So now I'm going to hand it off to Brandon to talk about some of our operational efforts.
All right, thanks, Deb. So again, I'm Brandon Schrader. I'm a region manager in our department in the operations division. Additionally, from our operations division on the call tonight is Dave Knopp, our chief of North Operations, and Roland Quindoy, our supervising park ranger for the Felicita work group. You can actually see Roland on the left in that photo right there. The group that maintains the Sage Hill Preserve is based out of Felicita Park. within that work group, we do have one ranger whose primary purpose is patrolling and maintaining all of our preserves in the area. So our open hours at Sage Hill Preserve are sunrise to sunset, with gates opening where it's applicable, gates opening by 8 a.m., consistent with all county preserves operating hours. Some of the ongoing, the normal duties that our staff there is doing each day is, the regular patrols, opening and closing gates, removing trash, performing maintenance activities on trails, signage, fencing, that kind of thing, revegetating when and where that's necessary, maintaining fire breaks, dealing with rule enforcement issues, leading educational activities, leading hikes, and then of course the ongoing communication with park visitors and residents, such as yourself. Let's go over to the next slide. Of course, we recognize that safety and security is a concern. It's always a concern, and it's a priority for us. It is important. Our goal as park staff, as park rangers, is to gain voluntary compliance in those situations where there's a violation of a rule or an ordinance. 99% of the time, that voluntary compliance is achieved and everyone walks away happy. But you've got to recognize that there's an occasion where it escalates. When it does, that's when we call in the sheriff's department for backup. Enforcement issues that we have seen and would anticipate in the future are the things like dogs being off leash, smoking, off-road activity, illegal dumping. Those kind of things are going to be the most frequent issues that we see. And not all of those issues are witnessed directly by us or somebody else. Sometimes it's the remnants left behind of the activity. The good example here is that of some bike jumps that were brought to our attention recently. And when we heard about those, we were able to go in, investigate, find them, knock them down. But then, of course, after we started working on those, people did come back in and started rebuilding. So we recognized, and then we had to go back in and do some more work on them. We recognize that kind of thing is an ongoing issue and something we would continue to monitor. We will be having some additional signage go up and an informational kiosk that will communicate our park operating hours, regulations, and designated parking zones. Lastly, I just want to emphasize that we want to hear from you when there's an issue that needs our attention. I mean, many of you live within a stone's throw of the preserve here. So if you guys are seeing something, obviously in an emergency situation that needs immediate attention, that's a 911 call. But otherwise, please give us a call and reach out to us. The extra eyes on the park are always helpful, and it helps us do our jobs better. And I think it's helpful for all of us. So again, the example with those bike jumps was a perfect example. We heard about it. We're able to go investigate, see what's going on. We can, adjust a schedule if we need to go investigate something and address the issue. So again, the park staff, where you can find us directly, are headquartered at Felicita Park. Phone number there is 760-745-4379. And maybe I think we can put that in the chat here too. But again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us with your questions or concerns that you have. We're part of the community. We want to work with you. So with that, I will hand it over to David.
Thank you, Brandon. As we previously mentioned, there's an approved resource management plan for the Sage Hill Preserve, which includes an approved trail plan that is shown on the map on the left-hand side of this slide. The approved trail plan includes approximately 2 miles of multi-use trails that are intended to be used by hikers, bikers, and equestrians. The trail plan also includes approved access points, fencing, and identifies locations where bridges could be located. We've been working through the planning and design to improve public access to the preserve and enhance on-site biological resources consistent with the resource management plan. The Board of Supervisors approved the project through the 21-22 op plan, which provided the funding necessary to complete the improvements, and we want to hear from the community and trail users as we develop our plans. Next slide, please. Preserve and access improvements will be implemented in 2 phases. These improvements support the goals of the preserve, which are to conserve natural and cultural resources while balancing passive recreation. Phase 1 will include habitat restoration for existing disturbed areas, including areas with user-created trails that were not identified in the approved trail plan. Habitat restoration will focus on the planting of native species to support wildlife that exists within the preserve. For example, we plan to enhance and augment coastal sage scrub habitat to support the coastal California gnatcatcher. Phase 1 of the project will also include maintenance of the 2-mile trail system that was approved as part of the resource management plan. We will also include the installation of a small bridge to allow access over a seasonal stream. No new trails or lighting are included as part of the improvements. Phase 2 of the project will include implementation of a small staging area that is anticipated to include approximately 9 parking stalls, one of which will be ADA accessible. This will also include fencing, a park sign, picnic table, a trash receptacle, and an informational kiosk. And I'll go over those in the next slide. So this slide shows conceptual rendering of what the staging area may look like with the 9 proposed parking spaces. The parking area will be decomposed granite for the surface material, with the exception of the accessible parking space, which will be concrete. Minor grading will be involved to smooth the existing dirt surface to be suitable for parking. Lodge poles or wheel stops will delineate the parking stalls. We will install no parking signs adjacent to the designated area to make it clear where users may park, and which will help the sheriffs or CHP with enforcement. New lodge pole fencing will run the perimeter of the parking lot and connect to the existing lodge pole. A new information kiosk will provide information to preserve users such as trail maps, prohibitive uses, and preserve hours, as well as contact information for DPR. And a new sign will be located nearby to identify the preserve. Inside the staging area and next to the ADA parking space, a vehicular gate will provide maintenance access to the San Diego County Water Authority and Alevinhain Water District, as well as county park staff. The vehicular and pedestrian gates will be locked to control access to the preserve. Next slide, please. A unique pedestrian gate design will allow pedestrians, horses, and wheelchairs access to the preserve while preventing small motorized vehicles like dirt bikes. This design is from the USDA Forest Service, and wheelchairs are able to go into the center of the gate, turn around, and go out the other side, while horses can merely walk over the stiles. And this gate will again be locked to control access to the preserve when it is closed. Next slide, please. The staging area location was selected because this area is already disturbed and therefore would not impact on-site biological resources. Additionally, this area was identified as an access point in the resource management plan, and it is not in a location that is restricted by a conservation easement. As part of the staging area design, DPR completed a traffic study to assess the safety of the staging area location and make design recommendations. The traffic study demonstrates that the location for the staging area would not pose a safety issue. The study also recommends the implementation of measures to ensure roadway safety in the area after the implementation of the project. The recommended measures include installing a speed feedback sign, which shows the speed limit as well as the speed of motorists as they pass by for southbound Elfin Forest traffic north of the driveway. It also includes a recommendation to trim the trees on the east side of Elfin Forest Road between 200 and 300 feet north of the driveway to improve line of sight as vehicles exit the staging area. And it will provide approximately 9 parking spaces comprised of 5 spaces within the staging area for head-in parking and 4 parallel spaces. The 4 parallel parking spaces will help address the issue of vehicles parking on the road and enforcement of parking outside of designated spaces. Next slide, please. DPR has evaluated the improvements to determine the type of analysis that will be required per the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. Per DPR's review, the project qualifies for several exemptions as shown on the screen. Some reasons for these exemptions are because the project is in disturbed areas, such as the trails already exist, and the staging area will be in an area that is already disturbed, and there will be little land disturbance. Depending on the time of the year which activities occur, DPR will also hire biological monitors and conduct nesting bird surveys to ensure construction and restoration activities do not disturb nesting birds. Additionally, Native American and archaeological monitors will be present during the ground disturbing activities to ensure that there are no impacts to underground cultural resources. Next slide. And I think that's you, Jessica,
That's me.
right?
Thank you so much. All right. Good evening to all of our meeting attendees. I will be happy to guide us through the Q&A portion of this meeting. As a reminder, the chat function has been disabled, so the best way to ensure your questions are both recorded and addressed is to type them in the Q&A pane. We will do our best to answer all questions in the order received. However, in the interest of time, I may lump some of our like questions together. If after addressing your concern or your question, you feel like we were not able to answer it, please resend the question and we will make sure to add it back to our queue. Last reminder before we get started, this meeting is being recorded and it will be available on our website, sdparks.org, in the next few days. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. The first question I have, this is actually related to safety and vehicles, which is something that David just covered, but I think it might be helpful to reiterate it. This question comes from Gregory. It is, how will you ensure the safety of vehicles exiting the staging area to depart via Elfin Forest Road? Perhaps a multi-way stop sign.
Sure, thanks. That's a great question. Safety is obviously very important to us and one of the reasons why we completed the traffic study. We're not currently looking at doing a stop sign in that location, but we are looking to, like I mentioned, trim the trees to improve line of sight access there so that folks, when they're ready to leave, are able to see up and down the road.
Great, and I have a related question for you. How will you prevent spillover parking on Elfin Forest Road that might further diminish the visibility of some of that oncoming vehicle traffic?
Sure, that's another great question and one that we've heard before. So we understand that folks do occasionally park along the road there, and that can be an issue. And so one of the recommendations from our traffic study was, if you saw the graphic that included the parallel parking spaces adjacent to the staging area, is to actually formalize those and have them be designated spaces, and then additionally include no parking signs so that it is formally noticed, and that helps with enforcement. And so in projects similar to this, we have worked with the sheriff or CHP, whichever the local agency is, to let them know when we're going to be completing a facility like this, so that they have a heads up. Hey, we're going to be including this. We're going to include some additional signage so that you're aware. It will likely increase the need for patrols and potentially for citations. So really, it's a two-step measure. Just to kind of recap, one is to formalize the amount of parking that will be there, which we hope to take the pressure off that. And two is to include the no parking signs and to work with the enforcement agencies on that.
All right, thanks so much, David. Also, since you mentioned parking, I have a few comments here that I just wanted to throw out there. Lisa and John both had similar comments saying 9 parking spaces. It seems like it was more than was discussed at previous meetings. Do you have any information on the total number of parking spots from previous conversations?
Sure, the total number of parking spots really comes out of our traffic study, and it determined what the level of demand may be for a facility like this, and it was recommended that we go with 9 based on that.
David, this is Dave. Can I add to that?
Sure, go ahead, Dave.
Important part of this too is 2 of those are ADA parking spots. So it's 7 standard spots and 2 ADA.
8 plus 1, actually.
8 plus 1, sorry, 8 plus 1.
All right, thank you. All All right, we have a comment here about trespassing. This was a comment from John. He's saying, please remember that Quest Haven Hill concerns exist about trespassing, and John is wondering what the park team is going to be doing to help lessen the issue of trespassing. And it sounds like that's a good question for Brandon in terms of park operations.
Brandon, go ahead, take this first. I'll add.
Thanks. Yeah, again, we will post signage where it's necessary to delineate where the county preserve begins and where private property ends, and vice versa. So you know where you're at when you're on public land, where it's publicly accessible. I mean, that's where we try to guide people. You know, as we come across issues, if there's people getting through in areas where they're not supposed to, then we go look at what measures can be taken to, you know, either put in some fencing, boulders, or some kind of, you know, obstruct it in some way to prevent people from accessing the preserve illegally. We want them to go through the legal, intentional entry points. So that,
If I can,
yeah, please, Dave.
yeah, and then if I can, this is Dave Knopp. I'm Chief of Operations. Brandon and I and Roland are the part of the team for operations. DPR has 156 parks. Preserving the land includes being a good neighbor and delineating that space. So two parts to that is, you know, we definitely will do education on where the trails are, where you should be as public use of the facility, and places where illegal trails are built or have existed. Going to places like that, those we'll work on to remove. And that's been done in many places. We've had people take a tractor from their house into a preserve to make a connection, and had to go back and work with those people to educate them, and then work with them to help pay for that restoration. We've also gone into places where it's on us, taken tractors, revegetated, and done that work. But I would say the other thing, if you could, this gentleman, if it's a one property, if it's your property where the issue is existing, we also want to hear that too. And I know we have an email on it, but we should make a straightforward connection. Roland Quindoy, the supervising park ranger at Fellows City, who oversees this area, would be a great contact. But you're welcome to call Brandon or myself and discuss what's going on and what we can do to help. That's it for me.
All right, thank you, Dave. All right, since we're kind of talking about park operations and maintenance, we have a question from JP. The question is, will the parking area be closed to the public outside of visiting hours? For example, will there be gates closed? I guess, will there be gates that are preventing after hours parking? And that would be.
Let me take that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So, you know, one of our desires or planning would be a locked gate in the parking area. But in that management, it's also using an area that's already been disturbed. That's the area with the water district, and working with them. So unfortunately, what we haven't been able to do is get approval for a locked gate, for their liability and for their reasons. That's not to be permitted, but that's not a stop, and we don't do anything from that point. One of the things that we will do, this parking lot will include that signage. First, it'll have a gate from the parking lot into the reserve that we will shut. We will lock it morning or unlock it in the morning and lock it at night. But we'll also have signage in the parking lot, and that signage will state the hours, include an enforcement code. And what that does, what that improves, is the ability to work with us to remove that situation, work with us to have the sheriff or police department, highway patrol help us with that. It creates an enforceable code. So if there's a problem in the parking lot, people are causing an issue, we call the sheriff comes out, and there's nothing going on at that time. There's just people sitting in cars. They might have been smoking or drinking something before. They might have been doing something, playing loud music, but they're not supposed to be here. Now the sheriff has the ability to ask them to leave. And if they won't leave, he or she has the ability to do something about it. So it's not the number one answer that, yeah, we have a locked gate, but it's the best thing we can do at this point. And we understand that concern. Like I said, safety wise, we want the best. Hope that answers that.
All right, thank you, Dave. Okay, a related sort of a security question we have here. This is from Gregory. Gregory is asking, will you be scheduling evening patrols to ensure that visitors have left the property and are not still in the park? And that,
The simple answer is yes. That will not be a nightly activity. It will be something done a couple times a week. It will be done in communication with the community. If we're seeing something, it's Tuesday night at 10 o'clock, it happens, or it's Thursday morning at 4 o'clock. We work with communities. We're part of the community. We work with our community to discuss where issues are and to work on those. And just like Brandon talking about the bike jumps, when you see something, let us know, and it helps that communication go that much faster and helps us get to those issues.
all right, thank you. All right, this question goes back to the development team. So David, when will phase 1 be completed and also phase 2? And let's see, I'm sorry, prior to any opening. So what work will be taking place now? And then in phases 1 and 2, and then when will the park be opening?
Sure, that's a great question. So folks are able to actually access the trails now. So those portions are open. We're working through the design, as I mentioned, for the staging area and the access in that area. And we think that's going to take a couple months. And we want to get the feedback from the community and be able to incorporate that into our designs to make sure that we're meeting those needs. And so then after that, we would go through the process of getting a contractor and getting them on board and getting them out there to do that work, which would probably happen sometime next year.
Great, thank you. We have a question here about vehicle speed and just the general traffic study that took place. This might be a good question for the Resource Management Division to respond to, but can you provide some information about how we conduct traffic studies to calculate the safety of parking areas and entrances and exits to our properties? So that would probably be a question for either Deb or Crystal, unless David wants to jump in.
I think, David, do you want to take that question, or do you want my team to?
Yeah, I think that's probably a little bit more specific than I could go into this evening, just in terms of like all the engineering that goes into it. But I do know that they take the posted speed of the road and use that as a baseline when they're doing their analysis for that.
All right, thank you. Well, here's a question that is for sure for the Resource Management Division. Can you share a little bit about the most recent gnat catcher survey that's been conducted by the Department of Parks and Recreation?
Yeah, absolutely, Jessica. This is, let me turn my camera on. Hi, everybody. Deb Mosley, again from Parks. So we have initiated what we call our baseline surveys starting in 2020. This was a repeat from when we did our original baseline surveys when we acquired the property, and we typically do them every 10 years. So to answer the question in terms of when was the last time that we've done our biological monitoring specifically for California gnatcatcher, we started our latest set of surveys in end of 2020 and are working through the end of this year to do multiple biological surveys and work on kind of collecting all of that data and wrap that up. Our biological surveys take about a full year to a year and a half, depending on the season and what species are on the process. So on the property. So we're in the process of completing those now and finalizing our reports.
All right. Thanks, Deb. And you mentioned acquisition. I see a question here that is related to that. This one comes from John. John's asking if there are any plans to purchase additional adjacent land.
So we, my team also is responsible for the acquisitions, and we are always looking for opportunities to purchase a land that meets our criteria surrounding all of our different preserves and property. So we would consider any areas around Sage Hill that was opened for sale and that there was a willing seller. And as we would with any of our properties.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Great, we have a question from Tom. Tom's asking what our plan is to keep hikers from parking cars on adjacent private roads, Fortuna Del Norte and Carib Road, and using these roads as hiking trails to access Sage Hills. So I know part of it is actually having that designated parking space, which is right there on the park property, in addition to having educational signage and to hosting educational activities where we can remind folks what it means to be a responsible trail user. But I want to hand this question also over to Brandon, maybe to talk a little bit about the education programs that we host at some of our park properties to remind people about responsible trail use. And then maybe any signs that we'll be posting to help educate people about where that designated parking is located.
Sure, thanks. So the first question was, the first part of it was more about the educational components, interpretive programs and signage. Yeah, we can, we don't have it drafted up yet, but it'd be appropriate to put up some signage to, one, not only, communicate regulations and enforcement, but the native habitat that's there, and hopefully convey why it's important to protect that. Our rangers are educators. They work regularly with school groups. We do environmental education programs in many of our parks. Sometimes that's in a semi-formal way, and sometimes it's organized school field trips. So, Roland and his team, he's got a couple other park rangers on his team that are experienced in providing, guided hikes and educational programs. And this is something that we could do here. A hike, we can have organized ranger-led hikes here also that would, we would put on, through our program guides or our website or whatever. Meet up at the park and walk through with a small group, pointing out native flora and fauna, and hopefully, getting it those that participate a deeper appreciation of it. Did I answer the question, or am I missing?
Yeah, and maybe also just speak to signs that'll be posted about designated parking.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Brandon, let me take that one. We'll
Yeah.
share. So, Jessica, you hit it in the beginning. We'll do education on where you should park. We'll work with neighbors to help with people parking in illegal places, or if it's legal, and pointing them in directions they can go. We can also help with the communication with police department. But right now at the Sage Hill, you can park on the side of the road. I'm here right now. I'm in front of the water district tank, and there's room for 4 or 5 cars off the side of the road. And I've seen a couple cars cut and go in the time I've been here. So education on where a safe place is and where it's appropriate to go, making that the most inviting place in the preserve to start from, to gather your information as you go, will help. We'll direct people that way. And like I said, where there's issues in other places, we definitely are a partner.
And just one last point on that. I know we've really talked about this a lot, but it is a team effort. And I just want to reiterate that if you have specific ideas about areas within the preserve that could use some additional fencing to discourage folks from crossing across private property or whatever it may be, reach out to Jen, reach out to my team. We're here to listen. We want these ideas to make this as good as possible for the community. So please do reach out to Jen. Her information's in the chat. We'll show it again at the end, and we can walk through those on a much more fine-grained basis.
Great, thank you, Dave. Actually, since I've got you here, there's a question from Lori asking if there will be a crosswalk for equestrians who regularly cross at the area where the new parking lot is being proposed.
That's a great question. We had not so far considered a crosswalk at that location. But that's something that we can take back to our traffic engineers and ask them about. I have worked on other projects in the past where we've looked at crosswalks and it requires a certain amount of traffic to warrant them. But we're happy to take that back to the engineers and look at it and see if it warrants a crosswalk there and if that's going to be a safe condition.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have another question that goes back to Dave and Brandon. This is coming from Dennis. He's saying that increased use sometimes brings degradation. Any plans for increased patrols or monitoring within this new property?
Okay, Brandon, I'll start. You guys finish. Yes, I mean we're out here a couple times a week, 3 times a week, walking the preserves. Keeping up the trails is definitely our task. Not only will we do it with Roland's team at Felicita, but we have a couple trail work crews in the department who come out and are scheduled. The nice thing is I came out today and I walked. I've picked up 2 pieces of paper in about a 1.5 mile walk. Otherwise, I haven't seen anything except the pile of rocks, which I'm proud to say I stacked as high as my waist today. That's my record. But yeah, I mean, we take great pride in the trails, and that means not just leaving the property. We definitely will have staff out here patrolling it, but also maintaining it. Like I said, that part of this project is 2 bridges, so we don't continue to find new ways through the creek, around the creek. We want one direct way. Places where there's parallel trails, trails that aren't appropriate, you'll see revegetation, and illegal activity will have the same thing. The trail should be seeing work now, but you'll continue to see improvement in the area. The parking lot, I have one warning. The parking lot comes with hours for staff. We'll be getting another 10 hours of park attendant time, which means we can focus on having someone out here some more time. Like I said, and we take pride in what we have, and we take pride in the community.
Thanks, Dave. Okay.
Can I add real quick? I just wanted to say, and yeah, the answer on a lot of those kind of concerns is additional patrols or more strategic patrols on the time and day. And that's where we want to hear from you again. If you're observing, if we hear something like, hey, right around sunset on Fridays, we're starting to see a group of kids going into there and partying or something, that's what we want to hear, that so we can, again, strategically schedule the staff to get over and make those patrols at that time and see what's going on. But also, I just wanted to point out, I just put my email and phone number in the chat here. Hopefully y'all can see that. And like I said, I want to hear from you. So for some of these on a specific issue or a specific location, if you want to shoot me an email or a phone call, and we can dig into the exact area of your concern, and talk through that a little bit more, I invite you to do so.
Thanks, Brandon. We had a comment here from Lori, who's asking if we can prevent people from parking on Fortuna del Norte. I think that kind of goes back to what you all have been referencing, that we will have signs posted, we will have increased patrols in the area, and we're also going to be visible, we're going to be present. So if you see something that doesn't seem appropriate, or if you're experiencing issues with parking in a specific area that you don't feel is safe, please contact us and let us know. We want to work with you to make sure that this is a great recreational opportunity for all. Okay, we have a question here about another improvement or staging at Quest Havens Road entry. This one comes from John. David, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, and I think maybe Deb, you can help me out on this one a little bit. We don't currently have any plans over there, and I think part of that is related to some of the restrictions based on the property at that end. Deb, is that right?
Can you clarify which part of the preserve you're speaking about?
The north entrance we spoke about this morning.
So it's the question about what restrictions we have on, because what happens is, so our preserve our trail goes to the end of our preserve and then it goes onto private property. And then I believe also HOA land at that point.
Yeah,
Right,
the
and
question-
so to that point, we're not planning on building a staging area because we don't own that land.
Oh, no. And so, yes, we don't own that land, but also, and I see where you're going, David, I apologize. Also the location of the staging area, as David mentioned in our presentation, was identified and selected in the location that we picked because of the restrictions due to the management agreement and the conservation easement. So even if we did try to move it into other parts of the preserve, we wouldn't be able to do that because we had to pick a disturbed area where it would not impact the species and the habitat. And so really the location that we picked was ideal from that perspective. And then also, like we just talked about in the northern part of the preserve, right above where we own, that is private property and we don't own that. So we wouldn't be able to put a stationary in that location either.
All right, thank you. So speaking of staging and parking, we have a question from Leonard who's saying, how far along EFR north and south of the staging area will no parking signs extend? Will there be no parking signs at the more southern access point? And so I refreshed my memory about who we work with to ensure that those road signs are placed, and if we need to add additional road signs, how we get that process
Sure,
going.
I can speak to that. And so we currently plan to have the no parking signs adjacent to the area around the staging area so that if folks are getting into the staging area, they understand that they need to park in the designated spaces. And it's a really good question. How far out will we place those signs? We haven't determined that. And so I don't have a final answer, but that's definitely a question that we can take back to our traffic engineer for some recommendations. And as we work through the process, like I mentioned before, we do also work with the local authorities, whether it's CHP or sheriffs, to get their recommendation on what would be the most effective on how far out should this be signed. And then making sure that we have the proper clearances within the roadway right of way to put the signs as needed. So just to recap, definitely outside of the staging area, but we have not set a final plan for where they will be along the roadway, but we will continue to work on that and happy to follow up with you on that.
Great, thanks, David. Okay, so we have a question about wildfire risk here. This one comes from Patty. She's mentioning that this is an area that is located in a severe wildfire risk area. Have the governing departments signed off on this project, and who? And this could be a good question for the initial environmental review or operations in terms of working with the local emergency personnel.
David, is there a project requirement with the fire department?
Well, I mean, typically for all of our projects that we develop access for preserves, we do speak with, like I said, all the local agencies, including fire and sheriff and CHP, to ensure that there's good overlays and they understand what's out there. So it would be the same for this project. Brandon, I don't know if, or Deb, if there's anything you wanted to add to that as well in terms of the prior announcement.
Hey, Brandon, I'm sorry to cut you off, but or maybe even Roland in the work that's done out here to in regards to fire prevention.
I'm not sure if Roland has the is in the right way where he can talk. Roland, if you are able to talk, please do so. But otherwise, I would say a couple of things. One, it was part of the resource management plan too that the resource management team put together, identifies fuel modification zones, and it is up to us in operations to maintain those zones annually. So we have those designated areas along roads, anywhere near any structures where we're going to go in, a minimum of once a year, but it's as needed. We would monitor the vegetation, how thick it's growing in, and And we go through there, and like Dave mentioned earlier, it's either with our own crew or we have the park operations stewardship team, which does that kind of work, and they go all over the county, but they're also headquartered right there at Felicita Park too. So we have been talking with them quite a bit lately about this one. And then occasionally we will bring in also California Conservation Corps to help with those fire breaks as well. So, but yeah, that's part of the ongoing maintenance plan.
So I'm just jumping in on top of what Brandon's saying. I'm going to say the same thing in a different way. Fire management, vegetation removal for that purpose is something we do in every park, including this one, have been and will continue to do. The trails, it's one of the areas where you keep certain trails wide enough for a vehicle to get through, because in a fire you want to get the trucks there as fast as possible. That's also done, but fuel management where it's appropriate, and especially with the environment that's here, it's something we do.
Great,
And,
thanks,
and I
Dave.
will, I'll jump in as well, in terms of that. Every time that Parks, and Brandon alluded to this, when we do a resource management plan, we always do a vegetation management plan. We work with the local fire department as well, and we did do that in the development of the resource management plan, because we want to ensure that any trail plans or any public access is reviewed by them, and that they approve it. And also when it comes to vegetation management and fuel modification zones. So that was conducted when we were developing the resource management plan.
Thanks, Deb. Actually, while I have you on here, I have a question that's related back to RMD. So this question comes from Lisa. She's asking if the prior monitoring conditions of the ESA permit and management were completed. It sounds like some folks may not have that same information. Can you provide more information about the ESA permit and management plan?
Absolutely. So I do want to clarify it, and maybe this could be a follow-up that we could do after the meeting if there's further questions, because we don't have an ESA permit. So we did get Section 6 funding, so I don't know if that is what is being referred to here. But in terms of our management and monitoring, so this is, as I mentioned in the draft, North County plan area. Once our plan is adopted, there will actually be goals and objectives as part of our MSCP, or called the Multiple Species Conservation Program. So once that plan is adopted in a couple years, there's going to be monitoring requirements for all of our preserves in the North County area that are covered under that plan. In the meantime, all the monitoring that we have been doing as since we have acquired the property has been consistent with the requirements that are in the management agreement that we have signed with Sandag, and also the conservation easement. In addition, we have the monitoring details in our resource management plan, and we are consistent with that. So if there's further questions regarding this, we can definitely talk offline, and we can go over more detail what monitoring we've done and what data we have and what we have found on site, if that helps.
Great, thanks, Deb. And some of these questions we can also incorporate into our frequently asked questions document that will be saved to our website. And so if there's additional questions that you send following this meeting, we will make sure to continue to update that FAQ doc to ensure that your answers are responded, or your questions are responded to. Okay, we have a couple of questions in here about just general park visitation. And I know because this is a different type of property, we may not have that information, but I'd like to hand this over to either Dave or Brandon to talk about park visitation in the relative area where the ranger staff are patrolling, or if you have any other statistical information you might be able to share.
Right. this being a newer one, we don't have statistics on that right now. If I'm gonna give in, I mean, I don't know how much of a number, an anticipated number I could put out there. I mean, I can make an educated guess based on similar preserves, similar sizes and circumstances, but that's all it would be a guess. And some of those, you know, maybe you're seeing 10 to 20 people a day on average.
Hey, Brandon,
But
sorry,
again, I would have to wait and see.
Brandon, we could send it to somebody that wanted to know. We did, under Jessica, we did a survey attendance for Sage Hill, I believe. So if somebody wanted that, we could chase that down. Sorry, no, you're right.
Great. So combination of probably both those responses. It's still a little early. Once we have the trails defined and signs posted and the parking area open, we'll have a better idea of what that visitation looks like. But on average, it seems pretty low. All right. So I have a question about e-bikes, and I think Dave is the expert on e-bikes for our team. Will there be any e-bike restrictions, Cat 1 or 2?
Okay. I have lots of e-bike experience, and it is a challenge for trails, and will continue to be. And they will also be an amazing thing, and that people who have limits will help. For those getting up a hill, it'll help. So in short, class 1s and class 2s, those are bikes that are limited to 20 miles an hour. That's still pretty fast. Before they shut off the pedal assistance, and they have a sticker on them. In the state of California, those are to be listed as bikes. So use on most county trails, e-bikes are allowed. What's different is electric bikes. I have to define the two separately. That's everything else. That's anything that doesn't have a sticker, which is most electric bikes, and they can exceed that speed. I just got off this morning looking at an ad for one that'll go 40 miles an hour. We have a requirement in DPR that you use trails safely. So that means you go at a speed that is safe for everybody around you, that's safe on the trail, that doesn't damage the trail. And if we see it as a problem, we'll stop, we'll ask. If it's not the appropriate bike or they're behaving inappropriate, we'll ask them to leave. As Brandon said, when it comes to enforcement and we can't get it, we will work with law enforcement to take another step forward. No, we won't allow a electric bike who doesn't follow those rules to go through in a group, because we'll get group asked sometimes. But in short, we watch the e-bike question very, very well. But we also watch it in regards to safety all the way around for horses who can go fast, sometimes even a runner going down the hill, but also bike use. And you can do that without an electric bike and go at a speed that could cause a problem. So we're well aware of it. I would say that the County of San Diego is one of the leaders when it comes to monitoring e-bike use on trails. I say that because we take phone calls from all around the state of California, and it's something we'll continue to work on.
All right, thanks, Dave. All right, I have a couple of design questions. We'll pull David back up here. So first question for David, how large will the steam footbridge be?
That's a great question. We actually haven't designed it completely yet. It'll be a smaller bridge. We have some of these in other areas where, it's not a big prefab structure that looks kind of out of place in a natural setting. Just really enough to cross it seasonally and not impact any of the, kind of resources that are in that location. And we anticipate that would probably be field built when we do the trail improvements out there. And I saw a related question to this about will it bear the weight of a horse? And we would like that because the trails are multi-use, so we would want to do that as well once that is designed. But like I said, we actually haven't completely designed it yet, and we're more than happy to share any of that as we move forward. Again, if people want to stay in touch with us, please reach out to Jen, and we're happy to share any of those details. We work pretty closely with the equestrian community throughout the county to understand their needs, and so if that's something that they want to see here, we're happy to accommodate that.
Thank you. All right, this next question is a combo development resource management question. This comes from John, and John is asking, can the viewpoint close to the stream, or can it be further down to be under the tree cover? That's a nice area. John says the proposed location will probably impact the land more and where wildlife likes to move. So I guess the first question there is about the relocation of the viewpoint. Second is about wildlife traffic in that specific area.
Go ahead, Deb.
Well, I'll just say, in terms of making any changes to the public access plan, it kind of depends on what that potentially could have an impact to. You know, we making changes to the public access plan, the trail plan, would require a reapproval of the resource management plan, and that would be a pretty lengthy process. And if there is any impact to the sensitive species on the property, it wouldn't be allowed. But depending on where and what the viewpoint and what that means, and in terms of if we were putting a bench or something like that, I think we maybe could accommodate that, but I'm guessing what John is asking is actually realigning the trail. And if that's the case, that's not going to be something that we can do, because this is the approved trail plan at this point.
All right, thanks, Deb. We have a question about the overall costs for design and environmental studies. Do we have any high level information we can share about just the budget for this project?
Sure, that's a great question. I think it's important to kind of take one step back from that and look at what we've done with the property for a while back. Our current budget is $2 million for the current restoration efforts that we have planned, as well as the trail improvements and the staging area. And that'll include, you know, the engineering, the design work, the construction, and the environmental analysis that we've done for that, as well as during construction. We mentioned during the presentation that we will need some monitoring for archaeological and paleontological resources, and to do bird nesting surveys if we are constructing during that season.
All right, thank you. We've got lots of great comments from John. John, thank you so much. Please know that we're recording all of this so we can follow up later. Yeah, great comments here. He mentions the stream changes its flow direction quite a bit. It may need to be a little bit longer in terms of the bridge. So great stuff. We'll take a look at all of this as we embark on the next phase of this project. All right, we have some comments here about just the general parking in the area and how busy it might get. And I just want to reiterate that signs will be posted about where the appropriate parking is, but that our park team will be available to answer questions and to address concerns of the local residents who might be experiencing higher than normal traffic. So if you see something, please say something. Again, we've got multiple contacts here in the chat. We'll also include them in the FAQ doc and on our website. But we want to work with you, right? This is supposed to be a great resource for you to have some new well-maintained trails close by, safe parking as well. So just keep us posted if you continue to have concerns. Of course, we're all ears and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that safety and the security of your neighborhood is of top priority. All right, let me see if I have any more questions in here. Looks like it's mostly comments. In terms of the budget process, can we explain where the funds have come from?
Sure, I can take that. So I mentioned during the presentation that the board approved the funding for this project during the 21-22 operational plan. And so the board actually heard that item in June 29th of this year to appropriate the funds into our budget. And so those are county general fund dollars that are funding the project.
Great, thanks, David. Okay, A question from Gregory. Would we consider rerunning the traffic safety study based on average speeds of cars through this section of Elfin Forest Road? Is that a possibility?
Hey, Gregory, that's a great question. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't want to give you a definitive answer on that, but I don't want you to also think that I'm just not answering your question. So I will actually take that back to our traffic engineer. I do know from past projects that they like to use a set standard based on the manual for universal traffic control design. But we want to be thorough. And so we'll take that question back to our traffic engineers and we'll be able to put an answer to that to our FAQs that we'll post on our website.
Great, thanks, David. And we have a comment here from JP asking, will there be additional funding to manage, maintain, and provide more patrols? This is actually a great way for us to explain a little bit about our operational plan. And I know it's still in the works for this property, but Brandon or Dave, maybe you can provide some info on how we develop the operational plan and what folks can expect from that moving forward.
So this is a preserve. This is Dave. This is a preserve that's open. It's open and being used. And if you're a user of it, you're well aware of it. And hiking this evening, I said 2 bikers and another hiker joined me out in the trail. People are out there and they're enjoying it. And I saw 1 car next to mine down below, so I assume the rest rode in from neighborhoods or somewhere else nearby. This is patrolled. Like I said, staff at least 3 times a week. Coming by visually the area every day. We have Harmony Grove park down the road that has a set staff member, a park ranger who's more of those 3 parks because they're more of a community playground type park. Trails, like I said, patrol here. These are patrolled by staff. We will respond, and we still will respond to the community. I've had some conversations with some community members also talking about what does it mean in the community. It means anytime you want to talk, not just tonight, not just these phone calls, but we've gone to town councils. We'll go to PTA meetings, anything where you want to talk about the park and the part it plays in the neighborhood. We want to be part of that conversation and should be. Also, as Brandon talked about earlier, we have a couple trail crews who come around and do maintenance, and they'll touch this on a regular basis, a couple times a year. That's where they'll come in with a small trail tractor and do that equipment and do the trails right. Like I said, this is what we do, and we will continue to do a good job of it. I promise.
Thanks, Dave.
I jump right in, Jessica, on that. So in addition, we're currently going through our budget forecast right now, and we are putting in additional operational staff for the North County area, which would include rangers and staff that could manage the preserve, keeping in mind that we would be doing these improvements. So we wanted to ensure that we had the staffing to account for that.
Deb, we add the 10 hours we mentioned earlier to a park attendant time to have set people out here too.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. There's a couple questions about funding in here, and I think the best way to kind of respond to those is just providing info in the FAQ doc. So as soon as that is posted, please take a look at kind of the long-term vision for this property, funding, and kind of looking forward and how we'll be maintaining operational costs to ensure that the park stays in pristine condition for all of you who wish to take advantage of it. Do we have any more questions about the park project itself, the phases, any of the habitat restoration that's going to be taking place on site? Couple more.
I got cut off if it was to me, sorry.
Oh, no. All right. Oh, here's a great question from JP. Will habitat restoration happen before the construction of the lot or after?
So yeah, we've put in the habitat restoration is kind of part of the phase 1 of the project. And so we definitely can start that sooner than the construction, and we're working out those details in terms of the timing of and the order of which we would do the different aspects of the project.
Great, thank you. And I know by focusing the trail access on existing pathways, we're not forging through some of that sensitive habitat that's out there and protecting those native species that thrive in that particular area. You guys saw some photos here earlier tonight. Okay, so we have a question about the addition of any other structures outside of what was presented tonight. This project, of course, is focused on the staging area and the trails and the fencing and the gates around this specific entrance for the park and along the trail system. Right now, Simon, you had a question about whether or not a privacy screen would be added across the street from the proposed parking lot. That is not part of the design plan. However, signs will be posted out there again, and we will have a ranger presence on a regular basis. Okay, Dennis is asking if we know which of the unapproved trails will be restored.
So actually, I mean, we can go to the trail map if we, I don't remember exactly what slide it is. Right there. So the purple dotted line is our approved trail. So anything that you see, which is being highlighted by the red little dot. So anything in between that you see that is not highlighted is not the approved trail system. So we will be restoring those trails in the center of the preserve.
Well, thank you. Do we have any more questions outside of just general funding questions, which of course we'll speak of in detail in the FAQ doc? Looks like that might be it. Give you one more second to see if anything else pops up. Again, we're so happy to be able to present this information to you. Anytime we get a chance to open up a new recreational space, we just get so excited because we're creating new opportunities for San Diegans to head outside and be active, which is always important for, just a healthy, safe, and thriving San Diego. So we're excited about that. We're also excited about the additional attention, those habitats and wildlife will be able to enjoy with the increased ranger staff on site. So we're thankful for this opportunity to present to you tonight. And any additional questions, feel free to send them to any of the folks who have email addresses in the chat pane, including Jen, and her information is right here on the screen. She's going to be your primary contact for this project and this presentation. With that, I think I can let's see here. Oh, Scott's asking a question. He says he wants us to hold on to give him a moment to type. So we'll hold on just a moment.
Jessica, there is a question about funding for construction. So the funding is the only funding we're getting for the construction is through the county funding. There's no additional funding sources that we will be receiving. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Deb. That's helpful.
And also there's a question about the endowment that we received. If they have some further questions, we can talk about it offline, but we receive roughly, I believe, around 20,000 a year for the endowment. We can verify the number and we can ensure that that number is accurate in the FAQs that we post.
Great, thanks, Deb. All right, we got Scott's question. Scott's asking, do we anticipate hikers who hike the whole trail to return to their cars via the trail or via the road?
That's a really good question, Scott. I'm glad you asked that. It's anticipated to be an out and back trail. We don't have a loop system there. And so our preference would be for folks to hike out and come back. I've actually thought about this with the design team in terms of, are they going to do that, or are they going to access the road? And one of the questions that kind of had for the users of the trail system is that a location where the trail kind of tees down into the road? Is that a location that should be fenced and gated to control that access to keep people off the road? And so it is something that we're looking at. And if anybody on the call tonight has some input, please let us know your thoughts on that. We'd be happy to look at that. And Scott, I see you're all caps yes on that. So that counts as a vote. So let us know. Again, reach out to Jen if you have any specific areas throughout the preserve that you're concerned about access or fencing and gates. And that'll really help us as we fine tune our plans.
Thanks, David. And just a reminder, I know we have a lot of different faces, a lot of people answering your questions here. We all work really closely together. We might be remote right now, but we are very well connected. So you can ask a question of any one of us who have spoken tonight, and we will be happy to connect you to the right individual to respond. But please know this is a team effort. Again, we're always trying to do what we can to balance that recreation opportunity with efforts to protect and preserve our land and local wildlife. So this is just one great example of those projects. But we are happy to continue to work together for you and to listen to you. And we are just very appreciative of you attending tonight's meeting. With that, I'm going to hand this back over to Jen to close the meeting. It's been my pleasure to assist you with the hosting tonight.
Thanks so much, Jessica. You always do an amazing job with this Q&A. This concludes today's digital journey together. But as Jessica mentioned, our team is always available if you have questions or concerns about the project. Please don't hesitate to give me a call or anybody else a call. We can direct you to the proper person. Also, if you have a friend or neighbor that might be interested in watching the recorded version of this presentation, we will put that on our website. And we will also post updates on the project web page. That link is on this slide here. And we'll probably shortly post the recorded version as well as any FAQs that come from this recording. So until then, thank you so much for taking the time to help shape your community. We appreciate you and we wish you well. So stay safe and stay well. Bye.